Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there and welcome along to the show. Dan here with Michael from the Square Ball and Phil Hay from The Athletic as we catch up on another eventful week in the life of Leeds United. Show is brought to you by Astonish, our new sponsor, Michael.
By chance, I've worn this shirt from the video version. Again, yeah. Again.
Do they do hangover cures, Michael?
As far as I'm aware.
There's some hangover vibes in this studio, I would say.
Not from me, to be clear.
No, me neither.
I would like to formally apologise for my shambolic performance on the match ball last night. I was in transit for about 10 or 11 hours off the back of a wedding in Ireland and it got messy.
I thought you were transitioning to the other side at certain points. You were so far gone. I thought we've lost him.
He's gone. There's no way back. No, I had a good solid sleep last night. Back fighting fit today. Well, not quite fit, but all good. It won't be as shambolic as yesterday. And to be fair, this is not a live show. That was a live stream. This can be edited to make it appear better. But in the meantime, that's nothing to do with Astonish.
No,
because they do ethical household and personal care cleaning products. They're made here in Yorkshire.
Very good.
That's good, isn't it? Born and bred in Leeds, not like you.
I was born near Leeds.
Of course, in the satellite towns. Astonish's award-winning value products include the UK's #1 mould and mildew blaster, which you will swear by.
I do use that, yes.
Very good. The deep cleaning and safe-to-touch oven and grill cleaning paste. Have you used that?
I haven't used that.
Well, you've been given a box load of stuff here again to take home. I noticed that we had a box full of stuff sent in. It's all gone now.
It's not. It's there.
You'd never have thought, would you?
I've taken my share of it.
Oh, your share, right. Yeah, there we go.
Was Moscow not straight into that? I thought that'd be right up his street.
No harsh chemicals, no corrosives, and officially certified cruelty-free and vegan. Astonish.co.uk to pick up some stuff from Astonish. And of course, in your in all good, you got to say in all good shops, in all good bookshops it normally is, isn't it?
Home Bargains, I'll get mine.
Yeah.
On all good websites.
Yes, astonish.co.uk for details. And thanks to Astonish for the support on this. And we apologise in advance for whatever Michael says. So we missed the Monday show, so we're going a little bit earlier to try and sort of bridge the gap because we're into the final few days of the transfer window, Phil. And just in the last hour, as we record, Djed Spence has been confirmed at Leeds United, which is an absolutely rock-solid signing. We're off the back of the penalties defeat at Salford. So where do you want to go first? Should we talk about Djed Spence?
The only Monday show that's been worth doing for about 9 months.
Off the back of a win as well, yeah.
And you were getting tanked into the Guinness. Yeah, there's a lot happened, hasn't there? Should we start at Ipswich? I don't know. It was
Let's
really
work
good.
We'll start at Ipswich, work our way forward.
And
okay.
see where we get to. It was really good in a lot of ways. The most, I think, a lot of us have enjoyed Leeds United game for a long time. Very much showed the best of what Leeds have up front. Made Pirro look like a very, very good signing for £10 million. Liked him a lot. Thought he fitted in incredibly easily, considering that he'd only been signed on the Thursday night. But then again, not a huge surprise that when you think that he'd been playing for Swansea, so was fit. He knows the Championship inside out. He's got all the kind of credentials that you'd want in a centre forward for this division. So it made total sense, and I think it wasn't that easy to get him ready for the game and to get him at the team because they had to get permits processed and all the paperwork done. He only had the one training session on the Friday, but it was obvious enough that in Farke's mind, as soon as he got the permission to play him and was able to use him at Ipswich, that was going to happen. But I was kind of saying after the game, there'll be a day, and there's probably time on this podcast to fight about the defence. But in an attacking sense, Ipswich just couldn't cope with them on Saturday. And that was a very, very good win at what I was saying is a pretty bulletproof ground against a decent side who I think will be relatively close to the playoffs, if not in the playoffs this season. Very, very good result.
We started to find reasons to rule out Ipswich's goals, didn't we? So the first one was a deflected own goal, bit unlucky.
And it was offside.
And was it offside?
Probably. It looked offside, and even the Ipswich fans I've listened to thought it was offside.
Oh, okay.
So definitely offside.
Is that going to feature in propaganda when we do it? We're doing a propaganda this week?
No, because they just agree, and rightly so, that it is offside.
Fair enough. So that was offside and an own goal, so that doesn't count. The one at the end, just a lapse in concentration and probably took a deflection. That last one?
And just a hit from long range, yeah.
Yeah, so we're discounting that one.
Hope.
Yeah, what about the middle one?
McCody Drama's one, we're going to sell him soon, so that doesn't count.
Yeah.
And that was bizarre.
Human error.
That was something of a gift, yeah.
So really it's a moral 4-0.
It's all down the sides for Leeds, isn't it? But in a kind of very different way to how it was with Marsh, where there just didn't seem to be anybody there. It's not that there isn't anybody there, they're just getting in a tangle constantly in the full-back areas, which was the case at Salford last night. Not that Salford had a lot of the game, but Matt Smith's goal in particular, that was was a bit of a shambles, that, and that's where it all generated. But then, of course, sitting at Salford last night thinking Djed Spence is on his way up for a medical, he's going to sign, was, I think, comfortably one of, if not the best right back in the league when he was at Forest. So that surely, helps in that area. I think the overriding feeling at Ipswich was that if you've got attacking players of that quality, and Ipswich's manager, Cian McKenna, said this afterwards, suddenly Ipswich were playing against players of a higher level. So having had it their own way for a long time and, having not been beaten much at all over the past year, to have 4 goals stuck past them was really unusual for them.
In such a short window as well.
Well, like, it was, yeah. It was kind of like game 1 by 20 minutes in, which in the end it wasn't, because Leeds are kind of sort of obscenely charitable at the back. But it didn't feel like Ipswich were going to recover from that point. Again, I thought they played pretty well. It was just a good game all round. But I think McKenna was right in saying that at that end of the pitch, you've got players who are at a different level to what you tend to get in the Championship. And it was hard not to say to yourself, if Leeds can sort out what's going on at the back, if they can make the right signings and structurally get themselves sorted in that area, then they are going to be very strong, and they are definitely going to be in the mix.
Yeah, I think it renewed a lot of hope, didn't it, that win? The first win, obviously.
It should do.
Because we looked like we could just score at will, and then we went to Salford.
Well, I think the thing going forward is that looking at Pirro, I've written about him this morning, he's going to gravitate towards the centre forwards position, isn't he? He's going to be a 9, you would think. But he looked very good at 10 in what was a pretty fluid forward line. And watching back through his clips and his debut, it was quite easy to see what he does, the way in which he drops deep, the way in which he links up, the way in which he seems to read play around him. He looked like a really good signing on paper. I think on the basis of his first appearance is going to be a very good signing. And the goal he scored is what you want a centre-forward to do, which is to be part of the attack, but also to put yourself in a position where if something's coming up 6 yards from goal, you're there ready to stick it away. It's proper poacher's finish. But I did feel that, going through his performance as a whole, there's so much more than just a poacher there. He's a really good all-round player.
Worth noting that when Ruter's played at number 9 in the earlier games in the season, he looked slightly isolated, like we couldn't link up with him despite his best efforts. And I know that we were playing against teams that were sat like in a really, really low block, defending very, very deep, whereas Ipswich tried to be a bit more expansive, so it made the pitch a bit bigger for us to play in. But he did look like he just had the means to sort of, like you say, keep dropping into little pockets of space. Ruter would then go ahead of him, and it just all seemed to, I don't know, do you want to call him like the missing link in the side that's just starting to bring it all together? I
would say so. The space helped, definitely. But I think the rotation in that front line helped as well, because it seemed to be really difficult for Ipswich to read it and to track what was going on. I also reckon that Pirro's strength, because he does look like a good physical forward, will help Ruter, because I don't think that's where Ruter particularly scores highly. There's a lot of skill in Ruter's game, and he's very mobile. But I think somebody like Pirro, who can link up play and can take a bit of hammer but be effective at the same time, make a difference to how good Ruter is. It was a good goal from Ruter.
I was going to say, what a great finish. Well, not a great finish, but just to get the whole execution of it was really, really skillful, wasn't it? I've watched that a few times and gone, as he makes that final turn down into the gap, into the area, and you kind of go, oh.
Lovely change of pace, yeah. And I think that's what McKenna's getting at. You don't get a huge amount of that in the Championship. That tends to be kind of Premier League or top-level football. And I do, with Ruter, I do refuse to believe that there's any way in which you can have paid £30 million for somebody who is, abject and hopeless.
Are you not familiar with the work of Victor Alton?
I mean, I did see the penalty last night. I was there in full view of the shootout last night, and it was the sort of penalty I would have taken.
Did he change his mind in the run-up, do you think?
I felt a little bit like it, yeah. But it's probably the easiest save Alex Cairns is going to make this season, certainly from a penalty. But I think he's a talented footballer, Ruter. It can't be a coincidence that suddenly you've got Sinisterra, Nonto, Pirro around you. You're in the Championship and you start to look good. I always wondered whether it needed a season like this to properly get Ruter going and to get him to the point where actually you can look at him and say he is something like decent value, because he hasn't been to this point. I mean, in no way has he justified that fee up until now at all.
I think Pirro in the team as well, it seemed to make it easier for the players around him, because he's obviously a central player, and it feels like when we've had Ruter trying to do it, or Nonso or Dan James, these people over the years, they just have a real tendency to pull wide because it's where they naturally seem to play, whereas Pirro just seems to always be within the width of the 18-yard box, and it just made a refreshing change to look at the box and go, oh, there's actually someone in there who can get on the end of this, because quite often you see the ball's out left or something, then Ruter's stood next to him, and you think, no, you're meant to be in the middle at this point.
He's got sort of an intangible presence as like a centre forward as Pirro, hasn't he? In a way that maybe some of the other players in that side, if they play up at the top, don't. Because like Nonto played through the middle a little bit. He's obviously not a big fella in terms of height, so he doesn't have the sort of physical stature in that regard. And then Ruter, like you say, he's a bit sort of bendy and drifts out, and you've just got a rock solid number 9 is what I'm getting at.
You can teach centre forward play, but I do think it's quite inherent as well. I think it sort of comes naturally to the people who are best at it. And again, picking through the best bits of Pirro on Saturday, the movement for the chances that he had, the link-up play in deeper areas. He knows what he's doing, and he knows how to time his run. He knows what to look for. He knows the passes to play. I think you'd be pretty tempted to hope for 20 goals from him this season. He looks like that sort of player. And as I say, I think as time goes on, he will probably gravitate towards the 9 position, because that's what he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that ability to interchange, like you say, it can cause problems for so many defences who, like your championship defences are a lot more rigid, aren't they? They don't have the same wherewithal to, allow players to drift out of position and just let them go there where they're not a threat. They'll tend to, defenders will tend to follow forwards around.
Well, I think one of the things that's handicapped Leeds over the past couple of seasons is, I think anyway, this idea that certain players are able to play in positions that aren't theirs and it'll all be fine. So Strike at left back, for example, others at left back. And
just sign a left back.
Yeah, Robin Koch in the centre of midfield. And yes, it can kind of work, and it can be a bit makeshift, and it might see you right for a little while. But it was quite rare to look at those performances and think, yeah, they look suited for that. Whereas with Pirro, the versatility of being able to play at 10 did actually seem to be there. I did think that he had the attributes that could make him effective in that position, which ideally takes you away from the argument that is brewed constantly about other players at Leeds of why on earth are you playing him there when you should be playing him up front? If you've got a 9 who's suddenly playing at 10 and it doesn't really feel like it's working. Rodrigo's a good example of that. Then people do start to say, well, what is this about, and what is the point in this? And aren't we hamstrung by the fact that we're not just using him where we should be using him? So while I do think that Pirro is a 9, and I think that's where he'll be most effective and where he'll be at his best for Leeds, I certainly looked to that on Saturday against a really good side at a stadium where they just don't lose very much at all, and thought that's pretty impressive, especially with one training session behind them.
Yeah, and as Farke mentioned in his post-match, not having the time to pick up on the patterns of play and where players are going to be making runs and things, he looked like he'd played there for years, didn't he?
I think also listening to Farke's kind of verdict on him, saying things like statistics speak for themselves, he doesn't have to prove himself. I think what Farke is saying is that, these days in the transfer market, there are times where you have to take risks and times where you go for players who you think, maybe Ruter fits into this category, players who you think he could be great, but actually there's a little bit of unknown there. Whereas I think when he's talking about Pirro, he is looking at Pirro and thinking, this guy is an absolute banker for me.
It's a known quantity, isn't it, in this division?
Which makes it a good signing.
Yeah, and the elephant in the room last night with 33 chances was that if you put Pirro into that side, he probably scores about 10.
Yeah, but last night's game was preposterous though, wasn't it? It was almost physically impossible to have that many chances and that amount of pressure and to lose that game on penalties.
If there's one, if there's one team that can do it, Phil,
yes,
if there's one team that can do it.
I was going to ask William Hill for the odds on Leeds and Hearts never ever winning the League Cup in my lifetime.
They say that they say great sides always find a way to win.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, when it comes to Leeds United and cup games, we always find a way to lose.
I mean, Alex Cairns had a really good game in goal. Matt Smith got the sort of chance that Matt Smith is just crying out for all night. It was in that respect with Salford's goal really did play into their hands. But I think Farke wasn't very critical afterwards. He just sort of said, firstly, he thought it should have been a penalty. We were miles away from it, and you also sit in a corner of the ground at Salford rather than in the middle of a stand. So it was impossible to say yes or no definitely, but I thought it looked like a penalty to me on non-time.
Were you within object throwing distance of any of the Scholes, Keane?
No, they're on the opposite side of the pitch, away from the riffraff, yes.
Did you try and throw anything?
It was a bit far for me.
Right.
Yeah,
what would you have thrown?
Well, there were only biscuits last night, so it'd have to be like custard cream or a bourbon or something like that.
The awful life you have.
Which I think is legal, yeah. So, yeah, I think so. It should have been a penalty, yeah. But then, in saying that, it wasn't really one of those nights where you could say that the penalty decision particularly Well, it did influence it, but you couldn't see it.
Not with 33 chances.
That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah. What did you think, penalty?
Yeah, because they're always given. I actually don't like that sort of thing being a penalty because I don't like attackers deliberately dangling a leg into people, but then it's always given as a penalty in the Premier League. So when it's not given, it's kind of annoying that you've seen them given 100 times to other teams.
If Rashford is a penalty at the weekend, that's a penalty.
I don't watch Match of the Day anymore.
Do you not?
I'm an ITV4 man now. That's where we are now.
Yeah.
The professionionals.
Pure EFL followed by the professionals.
Yeah, keeping up on Gillingham.
Yeah, which brings us round to today. It's funny, isn't it? Like, before we get to today, these cup losses have often felt like quite unnerving. Even the, what was it, Crawley one, felt a little bit unnerving because of the whole blooming celebrity angle to it. Was it Mark Wright who came off the bench and was stupid? Even that felt a little bit unnerving, and we've got this sort of litany of these that have followed us down the years. I think a lot of people have kind of just gone, oh, well, it's just what we do. These things just happen where it comes to Leeds, and let's move on because there's bigger fish to fry in the last couple of days of the window. And then you wake up on Wednesday morning off the back of this and go, well, that was frustrating, but here's Djed Spence.
I start to feel more and more with the League Cup that either it needs to sort its act out, or the game needs to sort its act out with the League Cup, or it's going to go, isn't it? Because
Man City win it.
Man City win it all the time. Nobody seems to get really interested in it until around about March, at which point you're either in it and you've got a chance of winning it, so you might as well care, or you're out of it and therefore you don't. But I think particularly the early rounds in August are just completely blown away and overshadowed by the fact that nobody's paying any attention to them. I mean, I got into the ground yesterday about 20 minutes before the teams were announced because we were doing stories on Djed Spence. We were doing stories on Amiri trying to get a private jet home via his own bank account.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, we will do. We will do. So the thing I tweeted when I got in the ground was, and there's also a game on tonight. And I'm not saying nobody wanted to win that, and I'm not saying nobody would have been frustrated by the result, and it's better to win games than not. But I just can't remember a time when the League Cup kind of attracted less interest or less attention. It's like a formality that you have to go through in amongst the real action, which is the transfer market at this stage. And league games, obviously. League games are different because that's your season there. But the League Cup needs to decide, does it have a place anymore?
The Premier League are going to kill it.
Of course they are.
They're going to kill
it feels that was I think we were nattering on about Varane's tweet in the last podcast about him saying too many games and this, that and the other. And that, I think it was Adam Crafton, one of our writers, who said the only sort of make weight here is going to be that they get rid of the League Cup and give more money to the lower leagues. That's what's going to happen because that's a way to remove certain games. And Leeds will have played a lot this month, and you just find yourself thinking, you really need Salford? Do you really need Salford on a Tuesday night when the game is giving this little credence to the competition?
Yeah, and having to assemble a squad to see you through an EFL season, a 46-game season, those extra, I mean, in our case, it's 2 games, isn't it? But it doesn't help. Like, it's that relentless Saturday, Tuesday. You were saying teams don't get interested in the Carabao Cup until March. The final this year is Sunday, the 25th of February.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, so you're getting interested for the following season, which shows you how much I've followed the schedule, and also tells you how confident I was that Leeds were going to get anywhere near that. Which
well, the Carabao Cup is a summer months competition for us mainly, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It is. Yeah.
You see the Premier League killing it. Just looking at the list of winners, 2013 Swansea won it. Since then, it's been Man City, Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool.
Right.
That's it, you see.
So there's no point. You can try in it, but ultimately one of those teams will beat you anyway.
And the Swansea thing was an aberration because Bradford made it to the final, didn't they? So you never seen anything like that. It's once in a generation.
And they had Pablo, so you know it was kind of irresistible. But yeah, everybody has this image of your biggest clubs not caring about the League Cup, but the problem is that they're so good, they can almost, and they've got such depth of resources and so many good players, they almost can't fail to win it, despite the best efforts.
It just shows you the gap from there to there, doesn't it? But anyway, so can we talk about Amiri? Because
why not?
That really, really tickled me. Just the, I don't know, there seems to be kind of a subtext this year of, you don't piss about with Leeds United. There's that kind of is just quietly seeping out in the way that we're doing business over this window, and I just love the thought of Amiri and his camp, like having mooched around in town and gone, Trinity's all right, don't fancy this, but Corn Exchange is super, but having a little walk around some of the other areas and going, nah, I'm not bothered about this.
And then someone dialing up to say, that private jet?
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone.
Right,
yeah,
all the best.
It's like the
you see the
it's like the fuck around find out graph, really, isn't it?
You see the private jet terminal there at Leeds Bradford. You're not in that building anymore. You're over the other side.
Weird deal from the start, this one, and I think feeds into the broader conversation we've been having about how much players want to play in the Championship, which is not a great deal. And Leeds knew when they went to Amiri in the first place that there was a fairly high likelihood that they might be shooting a little bit too high there, and that he wouldn't want to come and he'd have better offers. And I think I said that when the story first broke, when Romano first ran it, I spoke to somebody in Germany who said, and now he doesn't want to go to Leeds, he's going to Marseille. Marseille didn't happen. So at the back end of last week, Amiri seemed to get interested, but there was this constant narrative in Germany of he's going to Leeds, he's agreed everything, and then suddenly it was off, and then it was on, and then it was off. And the club sort of kept saying consistently, look, it isn't dead, but it hasn't agreed to either. We've got a fee in place with Leverkusen, so it's kind of there to be done. But it is in the end his call. He's German international, he's playing in the Bundesliga. We're asking him to come to the Championship. And yes, we think we're a good draw, and yes, there's a lot to like about Leeds United. I think it's a lot to like about Leeds, the city. But we can't pretend that this is fairly ambitious. So they'd hoped to get him over the back end of last week, which didn't happen. He was on the bench for the game against Mönchengladbach. But then he did come over on Friday with his entourage. He met with Fark. Leeds felt like the talks had gone pretty well and been pretty positive. Looked at Thorpe Arch, looked at Elland Road. But my understanding of it is that Leeds were annoyed about extra demands that were being made. So the whole thing ran into trouble. And he was effectively heading home without anything agreed, without having done a medical. Leeds had hoped that he would come over and it would go so well that he would then proceed to a medical and they'd complete the deal. So as of Monday night, there was some pretty real doubt about whether or not it was going to happen. And because of those extra demands, although the club had paid to fly him over, they declined to pay for his flight back. So as far as I can tell, the reason he was in Leeds city centre was not specifically because he was looking around and deciding he didn't like it or the markets, but was because he was waiting for transport home. He was waiting to organise a flight home, which did, and he did get back to Germany. He didn't have to get
I'm relieved.
He didn't have to get the ferry from Hull to Rotterdam and then, hitchhike from there. He did get himself back. But I think there was frustration as well at Leeds that there was a bit of a narrative in Germany that he'd looked around the city and gone,
is it Kicker or Build, one of the two, that's kind of really gone to town on him about this?
I think it's Build. Yeah, I've basically made him out to be a bit of a child, and
have done a really nice bit for the Leeds tourist board by saying it's a fantastic city, beautiful parks, Yorkshire Dales just to the north. What's wrong with the man?
But from Leeds' point of view, it was in trouble before he went wandering down Briggate. It wasn't as if he'd gone away from Thorpe Arch saying...
I hope he didn't go down Briggate at about 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning.
Well, maybe that would have swayed it the other direction. He'd gone, I like this. This is really good.
I've seen that McDonald's, that 24-hour McDonald's.
I think you probably have to be slightly fair to Amiri in saying that when it comes to an offer from the Championship for a Germany international, there's a decision to make there. And if they decide no, then you can kind of understand that. But I would say it felt to Leeds by the end of it that there was a lot of messing about going, and actually by yesterday afternoon they'd just withdrawn from the whole thing, and it was we're not going to do this. It's a shame in one sense because he does look like a really talented player. And again, I think to go back to McKenna's comments, another one that you'd have been saying he's better than the Championship, him. But on the other hand, Leeds have just spent the summer clearing out a lot of players who don't really want to be here. So you've got to ask yourself, do you want another one?
This is true. It's felt like too much of a faff, this one. It's a bit of a hassle.
Whereas Pirro was done in no time at all. Other deals like Spence has moved really quickly this week. Ampadu, those sort of transfers were ones where the players involved just seemed totally committed to doing it. And you have to be careful that you don't end up signing players who are totally committed because they're absolutely...
That's their ceiling.
Yeah. Or they can't believe that they're being offered the chance to go to Leeds. You want players who...
Anthony Elding.
Well, you want players who think they're better than the Championship, don't you?
Yeah.
But are happy to be here. But at the same time, you don't want players who are kind of wavering because you know where that goes.
It's kind of spinning all these different plates at once, isn't it? As you come in towards the close of the window, it focuses minds because it's like, if I don't get anything done by Friday, then this is it. So maybe Leeds feel like they can get one or two over the line as a result of that pressure of time. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Amiri is represented by his brother mainly, isn't he? And you wonder how that has been a factor in how this has unfolded versus, let's say, a player who's with like one of the massive agencies and they do this more often, you know, like, because
yeah, possibly, although it's not as if you don't have established agents who play these sort of games as well. It's probably quite an easy stone to throw, that one, but I don't think Leeds were impressed with the way it was handled, and I also think they just found it.
I just meant on the basis of these so-called extra demands.
No, that's possible. I just think they felt, in the end, like there was kind of no point in flying over if you then get, and it just seem like in the end it was coming down to money, and there is a point in a discussion about money where you have to ask yourself, is this all it's about, or do you actually want to join the club? I'm not convinced that he wanted to come, I have to say. And I think it was the right decision to just let it go.
I was going to say, it's quite interesting reading up on Greta Steinson's personality in the report. You know, he joined Leeds in his role, is it technical director, whatever he is now. That he's very much a no-nonsense character, will not suffer fools gladly.
Yeah, we've got a big read on him, actually, from a while back when he went to Tottenham.
Might have been when I read it. Yeah.
Oh, it might well have been. This summer will have been hard graft for him, without a doubt. Him and Nick Hammond, there's been an awful lot to do, and I think with Steinson, I'm still really interested to see whether Leeds go for a more overarching sporting director or whether Steinson starts to run the show from this point. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they keep Nick Hammond on, because I think they're really happy with the work that Hammond has done through the summer. He's on a short-term deal, but there has been talk about him sticking around. But do they, in the end, go for the model that everybody else seems to go for, which is one man in charge of all this? Which Steinson is obviously senior, but you wouldn't say that he is 100% in charge of all this. He's just one of the kind of senior management. You've got
structure. Basically, with the two of them being in there, you've got one on the football side, one on the business side, effectively, haven't you?
But you've also got Farke in the middle, and that's what's been quite noticeable, I think, about this summer, is the way that he's driven targets, driven transfers, driven final decisions on who they're going for. There's absolutely nothing that's been done without him saying yes to it. There's plenty that hasn't been done because he didn't want it to happen, which I think has been the right move for this summer, because to an extent I feel like authority needed to shift a bit more back towards your manager, your head coach. And I know clubs don't really operate in that way anymore. It's more of a committee when it comes to signings and recruitment and strategy and everything else. But even though that's true, I still look at Pochettino and Klopp, Guardiola, Postecoglou, and I think there's absolutely no way these guys are being told what to do.
No.
That's not how elite coaches operate.
It felt like last summer was a split on it, where they'd almost allowed Victor Orta to pick a few and they'd allowed Marsh to pick a few, and there wasn't necessarily enough thought into, well, how are these players actually all going to fit together into a team?
I think there was, maybe looking back, a bit of complacency about the assumption that it was just going to work, and it just didn't. And I don't think in any way that they didn't sign some good footballers last summer, but they didn't make a good team, and that's the difference. And at Ipswich on Saturday, looking at that front four, looking at Ampadu and Archie Gray, which is a really good pairing, although it's not a pairing for 46 games. They can't just keep playing and playing and playing. And I get the sense that the big focus at the minute at Leeds is on the centre of midfield, because they do need choice there. They do need extra bodies, not because Gray and Ampadu have been in any way disappointing, quite the opposite.
Don't want to break them.
But nobody plays 46 games. Some people do, but very, very few.
Well, we've got the example of Sam Byram as a player when he was a young player coming through, played all those games under the Warnock season and effectively broke him.
Yeah.
Because he played too much.
Well, others as well, like Matthias Klake, those 92 games back to back, and it felt as if as time went on, that did start to take a toll on his body. I mean, I get that Klake was going into his 30s and so on, but I think Farke will be mindful of how young Archie Gray in particular is. But he's seen the Championship before with Norwich, and he'll know that while those two could play all the way through and could be great from start to finish, the laws of chance say there's going to come a point where you do need to mix it up, and you can't mix it up with just random choices. You need quality in there that can supplement it.
On the midfield then, do we know if Glenn Kamara's got a strong opinion on Leeds?
Kamara, the one this morning is Bulgarian midfielder at Werder Bremen, a guy called Ilya Gruev, which seems to have moved really quickly. He's 23-year-old, and I'm getting the vibes first thing that one's going to happen. Very much a Farke target. He's quite fairly young still. He's been at Bremen for a while. I can't pretend to know a huge amount about him, but that one, by all accounts, has got a pretty serious chance. I suspect they're going to try and do 2 in the centre of midfield to give themselves bodies there and numbers. And Kamara's obviously been linked for a long time now. The thing that interests me with Kamara, or sort of makes me wonder, is that he's been up for grabs. There's no question that he's leaving Rangers. The fee's pretty affordable. He's good quality player without any doubt, and I think would be a good addition to the squad, although he hasn't been involved at Rangers at all, so I don't think he would be coming in 100% prepped in the way that, say, Pirro was, having had games with Swansea. But the fact that they haven't just got Kamara nailed down, I don't think it says that they don't really like him. I think they genuinely do. But it feels as if they've been keeping their options open. It feels as if there are others out there that they'd be equally happy to have, which I guess is the way to play it when you get to this stage.
He's always felt like an option rather than the choice, hasn't he, as Kamara a little bit?
But I don't think an option as in we don't really want this guy, but if we have to have him, then we'll take
maybe
him.
Maybe not top of the list then.
Yeah, or perhaps part of a broader list in which it's a case of, there are actually some good players in here, so we don't need to just jump on somebody. But they are going to have to jump on some people soon, because obviously the deadline is coming. But it was just interesting chatting to somebody this morning. This Gruev one sounds like it's got a pretty good chance. It's come out of nowhere, and without a doubt, coming from Germany is another one. A little bit like Amiri, that Farkel have had a big influence.
The Werder Bremen English language account, I don't know if it's an official club account. There's no tick alongside it, so your guess is as good as mine these days. He's missing from training today, and they're saying in talks with other clubs is the reason for that. So,
very interesting. There we go.
Could be moving. Could well be moving.
Yes.
I just wondered, just returning to Victor Orta, do you think maybe he had too much power concentrated into his hands? And that's, I guess, given what we're seeing now with the split of power, you would suggest that's probably the reason. Because he became a single point of failure almost, didn't he?
I think there are ways in which you can structure it differently without having to go without, as I described it, an overarching sporting director. Orta used to take part in board meetings and so on. It was quite a small setup at Leeds in that you had Radrizzani, you had Kinnear, you had Orta. It wasn't the sort of really broad management team that you tend to get at really big Premier League clubs. So I think one thing that you can do is have a very senior sporting director who is, basically in charge of recruitment, but who is very much answerable to the board, and I guess who doesn't have quite the same level of authority. But in saying that, it wasn't as if the players that Leeds were going after wouldn't have been signed off by Radrizzani, wouldn't have been signed off by, or at least the contracts wouldn't have been done by Kinnear. So perhaps there is a bigger picture here that, yes, they got a lot of the recruitment wrong. Yes, Orta has to take responsibility for that. But perhaps as a whole, club scouting, clubs recruitment, everything else, it just needs to be better. It needs to be more targeted. It needs to be more effective. They need to do more of the right things. And again, to go back to Pirro, I know we'd all have picked Pirro. So you would say to yourself, well, why do you need recruitment people if we can all sit here and say, yeah, he would be great? But we say he would be great on the basis
we said it months ago, windows ago.
Yeah, the thing is, we say that on the basis that he scored a lot of goals in the Championship. And sometimes things can be...
Just take the win, Phil.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Say we called it.
Sometimes things can be really simple, and it does always help to dig far more into a player to work out exactly how they're going to fit and what their strengths are going to be. But I think that was what Farke was saying. Statistics speak for themselves. He doesn't have to prove himself, and falls into the obvious category. And I don't think Leeds have been in that category enough.
What do you make of the window so far? And we say that in the context of Djed Spence signing this morning, as we mentioned at the start of the show. It feels like, I feel like they've been more targeted and focused, and it's all just felt eminently sensible so far. And I'm aware there's a lot could happen over the next couple of days before the window closes, but it's looking all right to me so far. I mean, we were all properly narked about what happened with Max Aarons, weren't we? But Djed Spence ain't a bad other option at right back.
And in some ways, Pammy paid £1 million for him for the loan. It seems actually very good value, because when you see the way that players actually have their value written off by financial fair play stuff and the investment that you have to put into getting someone, it seems almost risk-free, does this, I would say.
I think if somebody like Aaron's about turns and goes to Bournemouth, having already started his medical, it's very hard to hang that around the club's neck. There's really not an awful lot that you can do. And, in the same way as somebody like Nonto trying to force his way out, how do you, if you've been relegated, how do you avoid him doing that? You can't, you just have to deal with it. And that's not specifically their fault. Some of the contractual stuff this summer has been ridiculous and has put them in a difficult position. But I don't know. Am I allowed to say I think it's been pretty good, actually, this window? I think I like Pirro a lot. I think Spence is a really good signing. I think Rodon and Ampadu fit the bill. I'm going to be honest and say, on the basis of the first month, I think Millie in goal ahead of Darlow is legitimate. I think that's probably the right call at the moment. But I still think that having signed Darlow, you would imagine that it was in Farke's head that he was going to come more heavily into the picture. I think, like quite a few of us, concerned about left back, definitely. But then again, haven't we been here for about 20 years and don't we have this discussion every single summer?
One day they'll do it. One day they'll catch us. They'll catch us all off guard. Luke Thomas is the name that won't go away. There's a lot of noise around that, and people saying it's done or close to being done.
They have made approaches for Thomas. They do like Thomas. They would take same as Charlie Taylor. But despite what they've tried with Taylor and the question being asked of Burnley haven't really shown any inkling to this point or any intention of letting him go. But of course, this is the part of the window where things change pretty rapidly and where players themselves start to say, I'm not going to play, I need to go. The issue with Thomas, I think we ran this on Monday lunchtime, the issue with Thomas was that Leicester were very much in two minds about whether it was a good idea to send him to a club who might well be in the mix for promotion like themselves. But he is somebody they would take, and Farke thinks that Byron will be back on the other side of the international break from this adductor strain, but it has to be a little bit of a concern given Byram's injury record that there's already something that's a bit of an issue. They do have Junior Firpo, and I know Michael is particularly excited about his return. I
can't wait to see him back for three mediocre games before he's injured again.
But then another 5 weeks on the sidelines.
Exactly.
But on the obvious front, wouldn't seem like a bad idea, would it, to get somebody in there?
No. Sign a left back. If we can get to the end of this window and say, bloody hell, they signed a left back.
Do you not think Cody Drama shows promise there?
It feels like Drama will go now.
Yeah. Which it's starting to look like it's the best all round, isn't it? After that performance.
Is. I mean, that was kind of the gist of the piece last week. He was into his last year of his contract. He's hardly played for Leeds. He's been really good at other Championship clubs, but it doesn't really seem to be making a difference. It was going to have
why is that though? He's gone to Cardiff and been their player of the season, and he pulled on the white shirt, admittedly at left back and not right back, which Farke took the responsibility for. But he just looked like a rabbit in the headlights.
Farke won't speak about this until if and when Dramé does go. But I think if Dramé is to leave, and I feel like he will, and I think probably most likely on loan, given that it's so late in the window, it's probably going to be difficult to get anything done permanently. But we'll see. Southampton, one of the clubs who do really like him. I think it'll be a question for Farke of genuinely why this young kid who got promoted with Luton last season from the same division was very good at Luton, won Player of the Year at Cardiff. Why isn't it happening for him? Why what is the issue? Why hasn't he been able to get himself into the frame and to play more? And why are Leeds kind of apparently willing to let him go? It's slightly odd. You're right about left back. I mean, I think everybody would feel happier if they brought somebody in, but I do think the centre of midfield is where they're probably more likely to suffer, actually, because there's JB behind Gray and Ampadu, but at the moment there isn't enough. So you'll have seen the link to Kenny McLean, Norwich earlier this week. Again, player Farke knows really well, but it doesn't seem like Norwich are in any way interested in selling him. So, quite an important couple of days, I think, on that front.
I mean, from the team selection last night, we have to assume that Farke doesn't particularly like the look of JB or Bate at this stage, because if ever there was a game to give Archie Gray a rest, for example, or Ampadu, you'd think it was last night. Yeah,
I think we all expected that Bate might be available to go out on loan as well. He hasn't been massively involved. I agree with you. Away at Salford, you feel like, and you'll remember that Farke did play JB against Shrewsbury in the first round as well, not to great effect. I think he just wants more experience. So, for example, your man from Werder Bremen played in the Bundesliga. You would look at him and say, right, okay, he should be trustworthy for the Championship. And that, I think, if you're gonna have a good go and you're gonna get promoted, that is kind of what you need.
Tanaka as well looks like he's trained this morning.
Yes,
out in Germany.
Yeah, somebody else they've looked at.
Kind of emerged and then went away again because he got injured, didn't he?
Yeah, there must have been somebody spying in the bushes. He kind of limped off and then was told, "No, you're all right," and carried on. I haven't been told that has been any progress with that one, but Gruev seems to be
Yeah, one of those names that we were chucking around weeks ago now was Masengo. He's still without a club as well, so he was on loan at Bristol City previously, wasn't he? And has done good things in the Championship. He's young.
He's out of contract, I think.
Yeah.
But it hasn't. Again, that name hasn't come up this week. So there's been so much noise about Kamara that I don't think it's going to be a massive surprise if, when it comes to they do Kamara. But as I say, that because that one's been there to be done for so long. There has to be a reason why they haven't just jumped on it.
In terms of other outgoings, do you think we're likely to see one of Nonto or Sinistera leave potentially still? Because it feels like, I know they've kind of come through the mini strike or whatever you'd call it, but it still feels like there's potential for them to leave.
I do wonder about Sinistera, despite what was said last week. With Nonto, the only way in which I see anything happening with Nonto is if somebody goes really big in the last few days. There isn't at the moment any sign of that happening, but you do get clubs out the blue in the last couple of days just going bang, do this, try and get it done. I don't think Leeds will be in any way minded to sell him. There'll be a price, obviously. I mean, there has to be, and I think given what's gone on this month, you have to be realistic in saying that if you did get offered a massive whack for him, perhaps it makes sense to say, look, there's been the agitation, there's been the problems. They settled down, clearly, but perhaps, it would make sense to take the money. But I feel like Nonto most likely stays, and I think that's a really good thing. With Sinistera, there was, without any question, there was some issue with the contract, and there was some disagreement there, which meant that had to be spoken about or discussed or resolved. And I think on the basis that conversation was even having to take place, it was a pretty clear indication that Sinistera was minded to leave and minded to go. Played really well at Ipswich, have to say. Thought it was decent enough when he came on against Salford last night, although it was basically attack against defence. So I don't think any issue with attitude in that sense, but on the basis that he seemed to be seeing himself elsewhere and you would guess at a higher level, I wonder what's going to happen with him.
And we saw what happened with Adams as well, getting into fractious things with the contract, and it's just very low key, slightly worrying, isn't it, that one?
Yeah,
in the sense that something could happen there.
I suppose the debate with Sinistera is, given that he's a really, really good player. And really good player. I mean, it seems to me that there are quite a few players who've gone from Leeds this summer who people are frustrated about the fact that they haven't raised transfer fees from many of the, any with the exception of Adams. Obviously, they got money for Rodrigo and they got a loan fee for Robin Koch, but there hasn't been a massive flood of transfer fees coming in. I think that's been the annoyance for people as opposed to many of the players who they're leaving and who they're losing. And I'm not so sure that there are many supporters out there who are sitting looking at players on loan thinking, I hope they come back next summer. Something like Jack Harrison, you can see him as an asset. But with Sinistera, obviously he's worth a decent amount of cash. He definitely is. But if you were to get promoted, is he somebody who you would still want? I kind of feel like he is. So actually, if the option was there to loan him out, if he felt like he just had to go and he didn't want to be here and there were contractual issues or whatever else and you had to loan him out, maybe that is one that could work for you.
For the greater good almost.
I don't know. Yeah. It's very hard to say. But if you did get promoted this season and Sinistera was coming back into the squad next summer, I don't know, you tell me. It seems like a hard way up, that
I feel like a loan out at this stage would sit very badly with people.
It definitely would. It definitely would.
But we've faced a few least worst option choices this summer already, haven't we, with the people who've gone out on loan? So, like you say, you can see it from a greater good perspective if he was to come back in, if we were to go up. But it feels like we need to clear the hurdle of going up first before we start to worry about what happens
It's a very,
season.
very fair point. And perhaps that's the cycle Leeds have got stuck in a little bit too much of saying, when this happens in X months, years' time, it'll all be good. But in the meantime, not dealing enough for the here and now.
Paintsil was a name that came up, and it always felt to me like it would involve somebody going, and that's one of the sort of common themes I think that's emerged, like on socials and forums and stuff, people saying, if someone goes out, you can imagine Paintsil coming in. That seems to have just gone off the boil a little bit.
I didn't get that impression last week. No, they did bid for him. The bid was 10 million euros. There's a financial issue, from what we can gather, between Paintsil and Genk. In Belgium, they're saying it's related to loyalty bonuses that he's due. And that appeared to become so much of a tangle over the weekend and at the early part of the week that, again, as of, I think, Monday night, we were being told that David Ornstein's been covering this for us, but we've been told that it was pretty much dead. What didn't look like it was going to go anywhere. Although, as we're saying, in the last week of the window, it's kind of all bets are off, and things that look dead. I think immediately you're safe to say that's, I've been cancelled this flight.
You've changed your mind again?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, you pay for the flight, yeah, and if you sign, then we'll pay to fly you back. It doesn't feel like Paintsville has developed at all since the start of the week, but I didn't get the impression that it was being done because somebody was definitely going. It seemed like it was one they'd got involved in regardless, but that hasn't looked particularly good over the last 48 hours.
With that in mind and the stuff that they're trying to do, and you're talking about maybe doing 2 in midfield, do you think they've actually done more business than you first anticipated in this window? It looks a little bit to me like they're trying to really get the squad bulked up.
I'd have to go back and think, but no, I don't think so. No. I think because there were so many outgoings and always going to be so many outgoings, I did think they were going to have to do a fair number of players. I feel like if there are 2 centre mids in, they're not far off really. Obviously, it depends if they lose anybody, but I think they're definitely in a position where people like Drameh, Helder, Greenwood, wouldn't surprise me at all if there are loan options for them, which Leeds are happy to take. It feels like you can actually lose a few of those players without thinking, well, we might need them at some point. But you see, I think Farke's attitude is, if the players aren't quite right for him, or if the players aren't necessarily good enough, or whatever else, the padding's no use. You need Bielsa always took this attitude.
The very definition of warm bodies.
Yeah, you need players that you really, really, really want to use. So no, I don't think if they get 2 centre mids in, say they got a left back. So I don't think I'd be looking at that going, wow, that's far more than I thought they would. I think it's what they needed to completely redraw the team and the squad and to give themselves a fighting chance.
Before we get into the Sheffield Wednesday preview. Oh yeah, it says it all, doesn't it? Before we get into that, we like to get you to predict things, Phil, because inevitably they'll be wrong. But what do you think's going to happen? I mean, both of you obviously are here as well. Answer this. What do you think will happen between now?
Can't ever feel like an afterthought there.
And
both of you. I mean,
you go without saying, baby. No, just what do you think will happen between now and the end of the window?
All right, I think, and obviously subject to change, I think there's a good chance they do this Gruev from Bremen. I think they do another centre mid as well.
Lewis O'Brien.
Again, hasn't been spoken about that much. It's not like anybody's pretending they don't know O'Brien or don't like O'Brien. I think the situation at Forest isn't that simple. But yeah, if it ended up being him again, wouldn't be a massive surprise. I'd like to think they do a left back. I'm not sure that they will. I think we'll see.
Phil.
Well, it's not that they're not looking, but for example, like Taylor they would take, but they can't get. Thomas they like, but
just sign a left back.
How come every other club in the Football League's got a left back?
I know.
Why do we make it look so difficult? How many teams are in world football? They all have left backs. Why can't we have one?
Don't ever seem to be any left backs coming through the academy.
It's a fairly standard approach to football, isn't it? It's put players in the positions that you need them.
Yeah. It's a good move. But maybe they do a left back, and the world is a happier place. On the outgoing front, I think there will be moves for some of the fringe players. Guys like Helder, or at least the option to move will be there. Whether it comes off in time now, we'll see. And Sinisterra, I really hope stays, but I kind of feel like I do wonder.
Do you think anything happens with Gelhardt?
It feels to me like I need to ask about Gelhardt actually. It feels to me like he's still close enough to it, if that makes sense, to potentially be needed, to potentially be part of it. But I don't think I see him playing a huge amount this season. I just think, particularly with what's in that forward line, might be quite tough to get games. I feel for Gelhardt, it's not developed for him, has it? And a few people keep saying to me on Twitter he's just not got it, Gelhardt. But I think he definitely did. When I think back to him when he first came in, just looked massively, massively talented, and I suspect he's not the only one who's suffered from some pretty fallow years at Leeds.
Yeah, the lack of progress from the club is reflected in a lot of the young players.
I think that's fair to say, yeah.
When we've relied on them in situations of stress. I mean, the number of times when Gelhardt was thrown on as a Hail Mary.
And I also don't think that enough of the academy players who they've invested in have moved forward in the way that they should have done. Perkins has gone out on loan to Oxford. guys like Helder, Drami, even Gelhardt, it just hasn't quite happened, has it? There haven't been any additions at academy level that have been, massive hits. And by a mile, the best one at the moment, by a country mile, is one who's been in there for ages.
Who's that?
Archie Gray.
Believe in the pathway, Phil. Believe in the pathway.
Yeah. It's Again, if you wanted to be really cruel to Victor Orta, you could say that's another failing, then, couldn't you? The pathway is not what we were sold.
I don't think they're bad players, any of them. I actually think they're good, talented footballers. But the way in which things have been at Leeds hasn't brought them on. And so whatever the plan was, it just hasn't worked, has it?
Well, maybe a lack of foresight in that regard. That the rest of the squad wasn't strong enough to support these young players coming through, and they had too much on their shoulders.
I also think, in the Premier League in particular, academy players have got to be incredibly high level to be able to mix it. And around them, they need real quality as well. Real dependable, consistent quality, which just hasn't been there.
In the last week, then the signing of Pirro completely shifted the narrative, as we spoke about on one of the most recent shows. And we head into the Sheffield Wednesday game on Saturday. I think there's a great deal of optimism and people looking forward to this game. I can't wait to get to Elland Road on Saturday and see how this unfolds, and see maybe that if Sinistera does stay with us, that front four going at Wednesday's defence, which, they're bottom of the league. They're not in a good place. Muñez is their boss. Do
you remember what happened last time he came to Elland Road?
Stop talking. We got him sacked.
Yes.
Yeah, for Watford, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say he beat us.
No,
but then I realised when I said stop talking. I thought you were going to give me a bad example.
No. It was the first league win of Bielsa's last season. It had been pretty difficult to that point, and then Watford turned up. Leeds beat them 1-0.
I thought you were going to kill my optimistic approach to this with some facts.
He got sacked, and Watford went through that cycle yet again, where they pretended it was all about the coach as opposed to everything else.
Right. Yeah. Apologies for me. Keep coughing as well.
You were a minute ago swigging directly from a bottle of cough medicine.
I'm sure you said at the start of this, I'm in fine fettle today.
I had a cough before I went off drinking.
Hangover's gone.
Yeah.
But
I had a cough before I went off to the wedding, but yeah, the cough has survived it. I don't think anything else inside my body has done, though, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, just to seeing how it all unfolds. It feels like a weight's been lifted. If things go right across the next couple of days, there could be a real sense of optimism when we get to Elland Road at the weekend.
It does feel... I'm aware of the implications of saying this, but it does feel like they're there for the taking as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
With them bottom of the league and pretty much in disarray. They had that bizarre press conference of announcing the new manager, which was very much a sort of a Chileno throwback, wasn't it? Where the chairman steps in and
digs out Carlton Palmer.
Rants absolute bollocks for 10 minutes. And everyone, the manager just sat there thinking, Jesus.
He's going to sack my agent. Yeah.
I called him Cisco Muñoz before. It's Muñoz, isn't it? Anyway, but he was saying that we are a better team than them.
Yes.
In the run-up to this game. So, getting his excuses in early, eh?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. You would just like to think that Farke, again, whatever the lineup, will let the front end of the team off the leash in the way that they were at Ipswich. There was no real control at Ipswich, it has to be said. It was just a sort of barnstorming game back and forth. It was great to watch. It's great fun. I think, from his perspective, Farke would be delighted with the win, particularly there. But I think you'd look at the performance and say that as time goes on, it would be nice to control games more than to, it to be a sort of basketball style. But what was going on up front, really encouraging.
Do you think Spence goes straight in?
I think he does.
I think I would.
Given that Pirro went straight in on one day's training.
Yeah, you would imagine, except I would suspect that Farke is a bit more committed to Ayling, say, than he was to what was going on at the front end of his team in the games against Birmingham and West Brom. So it'd be a big decision, really, wouldn't it? Because whatever you think of Ayling's form, he's a big character, big personality, one of the, by a mile, one of the most experienced people in the dressing room. So it's not. Whereas I think you can put Pirro in for Gelhardt and say, like, see it for yourself. You can see what's going on. I think with Ayling, you'd have to manage that one a bit more delicately.
I suspect he goes straight in. I don't know why.
Well, because he's an absolutely great right back.
Particularly in terms of going forward, he's absolutely. We've got the potential to absolutely murder him, haven't we?
And the legs to get back as well, which I think is something we've seen with Ayling. He still does contribute, but in every game he's had a moment where he's just looked absolutely beaten on halfway, and he's almost looking back into the space behind him and thinking, not anymore.
Long way back there. Yeah.
A few years ago, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think you sign somebody like Spence and play him 10 times, do you? You sign somebody like Spence to use him for the whole season. And again, he had options. There must have been a discussion to that, to that end, really, how much am I going to play? How much am I going to be involved? And I suspect he'll have had some assurances.
With two loanees in from Spurs, you have to assume that Steinson's linked back to Spurs there as well.
There is that. I think Steinson is a particularly big fan of Spence, but I think Kinnear has good ins at Tottenham as well. So they've been able to do Rodon, who was going to have to be permanent initially, and I don't think Leeds would have been able to have afforded him, but were able to get him on loan. And Spence, I mean, Michael was saying, for £1 million. For a full as a loan fee, and obviously be paying wages as well, but £1 million for a championship season when Aaron's would have been more like 7 or 8. Perhaps it's worked out.
Any chance of it becoming permanent if we were to go up, you think?
There's no option or obligation, but I mean, Spence isn't involved with Spurs at the moment. It's not to say that if he has another really good year at Leeds that won't change down there. If he's on the fringes, then potentially be there to be had, but it would have to be a fresh negotiation.
Yeah. Going from
so a lot of water to go under the bridge because it will depend on how it goes.
Let's just enjoy this season. Just don't fall in love, kids. That's the only thing we saw with Ben White.
Yeah, not just him. This summer, don't fall in love with anybody.
Do you think actually, though, more seriously on that point, there's more of an understanding now from fans, from a fan perspective, that this is almost, we're seeing a short-term project in action now. And we just need to get through this year, potentially. If we were to go up this year, push maybe next year. I think if it takes 3 years, we're probably in trouble because when the parachute payments start to expire and they come down by quite a lot. So really go for it in these 2 years. And then once you get up, then you kind of clear the decks again and start and look for to the Premier League then.
I don't think... I mean, obviously...
I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Obviously, there are a couple of loanees who might go back afterwards, so might not be your players. So a little bit like Ben White, they could end up being seen and being viewed as short-term solutions, Spence and Rodon. But I don't think with some of what they've signed, there is definitely a short-term view in as much as the club definitely realise that they need to get it together for this season, not to necessarily go up this season. I mean, they have to compete to go up, but it's not like it has to happen these 12 months or bust. But I don't think they want to be seen to be letting this season slide away. So there is that kind of short-termism, but I don't feel with some of what they've done that there isn't a little bit of a medium-term to longer-term view too. Like Ampadu and Pirro and another. Pirro is only in his kind of early 20s. Ampadu at a good age as well. It does seem to me that there are things there that they'll be able to lean on to a degree when they go up. But you can see more and more with the Premier League. When you get into it, you've got to spend. I mean, you've got to spend. So whatever they do now, they would have to make major additions to if they got promoted. And part of the reason for that is that more and more the sort of players you would need in the Premier League just do not want to play in the Championship or come to it.
It's funny, isn't it? The kind of the bind you find yourself in. I think Moscow said it before really well on our podcast when we've done it. Is kind of almost want to win the Championship every year, but then not go up because you're seeing what's happened to like the lower end Premier League teams already this season, and the fact that the division's already taking shape after about 3-4 games, whatever it is. It's like I don't want to be part of that.
It's almost an impossible conundrum going from the Championship to the Premier League, and the only solution to it is to basically find state funding.
Yeah, but we don't want to be down here. But it is. I mean, if we have a good season this season and we were to go up, we'd love every minute of it, won't we?
Yeah.
It will go down in history as one of those brilliant seasons. Great fun.
Didn't we say last year, and possibly the year before, that you almost have to condition yourself to start enjoying the individual games? The individual games that go well, take a load of satisfaction from that and don't get too sucked into the bigger picture, because quite often the bigger picture isn't that satisfying. There's not a lot you can do about it. You can ask your club to be more ambitious and you can ask them to sign different players and everything else, but everybody, with a very small number of exceptions, has got a ceiling.
Said in the last couple of weeks, more than anything, I just want something to get behind, like we saw with Bielsa. It doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be as good as that.
This feels like it's going that way.
Building towards it, aren't they?
Yeah, it's got distance to go before you can comprehensively say, this is great. But the good signs, and say it again, I have been really impressed with Farke's management. I do think he's handled summer really, really well. It will come down to results in the end, because it always comes down to results. But he doesn't look in any way out of his depth. He doesn't look like he's struggled to cope with what's been going on. He's held it together, and now that he's getting delivered Pirro and Spence, and hopefully, a couple more at least before the window closes, what he's been saying and what he's been promising is kind of coming to pass, you would say.
Right then, let's wrap it up. And I'm going to ask you in a clickbaity style, so the clickbait websites can report on this.
Oh, good.
Phil Hayes' 2-word assessment of transfer window for Leeds United. Is it strap in?
I'm going to say pretty decent, actually. That's 3.
That's 3. Pretty decent. Well, that's your forecast for the remainder.
Oh, what, for the rest of it?
Yeah.
Oh, pretty busy.
Pretty busy.
There's
Right.
not a lot you can do with a clickbait headline with that. If I give you the blandest answer
Well, I
ever.
guarantee it now. Phil Hay expects Leeds to be busy in closing stages of window. Look out for it.
WhatsApp me that as soon as you can.
We'll see you soon.
The Square Ball Podcast.